The champagne stain dried on her apron in the afternoon sun. She didn't change it. Samantha Frost had worked inside the Kang estate for 3 years, managing the household staff, coordinating the events, circling rooms full of powerful men with a tray in her hands and eyes that recorded everything. She was 25 years old, black and beautiful, in the quiet, precise way of someone who has learned that being seen and being noticed are not the same thing. The woman who poured that champagne on her was Evelyn Hart, the fiancée, the future Mrs. Kang. She did it slowly, deliberately, in front of 38 guests at a poolside reception. And then she smiled. Now you have something expensive on you. Samantha didn't flinch. She didn't move. She looked at the stain, and then she looked at Evelyn, and something passed across her face that was not humiliation's, something Evelyn couldn't, which was the first sign that Evelyn had made a catastrophic mistake. Because what Evelyn Hart didn't know, what nobody in that house understood, except for one man sitting quietly under a glass canopy at the far end of the pool, was that Samantha Frost was not there to serve. She was there to watch. And she had been watching Evelyn Hart for a very long time. Before starting the story, comment down below where you are watching from and what time it is there. If stories of karma, love, and hidden truths move you, leave a like, be sure to subscribe to the channel, and click join to become a member and help our channel. The gardenias arrived at 6:15, and Samantha Frost was already waiting. She had been awake since 4:30, running the overnight intercepts, the revised seating arrangements one final time, checking the repositioning of the 4 security cameras she had moved 3 days ago. Under the pretense of cleaning the canopy supports, the gardenias were the last confirmation. When the catering crew wheeled in the floral arrangements, she stood in the kitchen doorway, checked the names on the delivery manifest, and noted one substitution. A driver she didn't recognize. She logged it, moved on. The Kang Estate pool reception was not a party. It looked like one. The glass-top tables, the crystal flutes set in perfect rows, the hired string quartet warming up near the east hedge, the white sun umbrellas opening like slow flowers across the stone deck. But Dae-sung had designed the event with precision. 40 guests, all connected to the organization in some capacity, gathered 48 hours before Minho Kang's formal engagement announcement. An informal gathering, a test. Samantha ran it. She had run every significant event in this household for 3 years. She had done it in this uniform. The black dress, the white apron, the pearl studs she wore, because a woman with no jewelry at all would eventually attract notice. She had served tea to men whose names appeared in no public records. She had stood in the corner of rooms where decisions were made that would never be written down. And she had remembered every word. People talked around her the way people talked around furniture. That was the point. 3 years. She straightened a centerpiece that didn't need straightening and clocked the north entrance as a couple she hadn't cleared. Crossed the threshold, she sent one signal to the guard on the left. A single look, nothing more. He adjusted his position. Crisis resolved before anyone knew it existed. The thing Samantha hadn't resolved was Minho. He was 28 years old and still believed that the people closest to him were there because they chose to be. It wasn't ignorance, exactly. It was a kind of faith that his father had never been able to break, and had long since stopped trying to break. Dae-sung had understood that Minho's warmth was both his greatest vulnerability and the one thing that made him worth protecting. So instead of hardening the sun, he had placed something harder next to him. Samantha watched Minho from across the patio. He was moving through the guests the way he always moved. Unhurried, genuinely attentive, remembering the names of people's children, making each person feel briefly like the most important person in the room. It was not performance. That was the problem. People who were genuinely warm couldn't imagine that warmth was being weaponized against them. The thing Minho didn't know, the thing he had never needed to know until now, was that Evelyn Hart had attended 3 events connected to the Chian family in the 6 months before she walked into the gallery opening, where she and Minho had met by chance. A fabricated chance, built from a fabricated network of mutual connections, timed to within a week of Dae Sung's largest account consolidation. Samantha had pulled that thread first. Everything else had followed. 8 weeks until the wedding. Last Tuesday, Minho had mentioned over dinner that after the marriage he planned to grant Evelyn partial access to his financial accounts. It was a reasonable thing for a man to say about the woman he was going to marry. It was the thing that made today non-negotiable. Evelyn Hart arrived at noon, in a white wrap dress, and the kind of smile that required preparation. Samantha had studied Evelyn for 6 months before the woman ever set foot in this house. The pace of the relationship, fast enough to feel organic, slow enough to not trigger alarm. The 2 international trips that conveniently aligned with meetings Dae Sung had attended. The questions asked of lower-tier staff about household routines. The companion she brought to events. A woman with a face Samantha had flagged in an intercept 11 days ago. Evelyn was skilled. She had made one systematic error. She assumed this household operated without observation. She had not seen the observer. You. Evelyn's voice came from the edge of the pool, sharp-edged and practiced. 2 fingers lifted in Samantha's direction. Not a wave. The way you call a dog from across a yard. Samantha crossed the patio. Yes, Miss Hart? Evelyn studied her from behind the tortoise-shell sunglasses, with the expression of someone examining a surface they were about to mark. You've been circling this entire event. It's unsettling. I'm coordinating service. It's my job. Domestic staff doesn't coordinate. Evelyn's voice was smooth, low, calibrated to carry just far enough. They serve. There's a difference. Samantha said nothing. Silence was a tool. People who expected submission became uncomfortable with silence. They filled it. Evelyn filled it. She reached for a champagne flute from the tray beside her, held it for a moment, then tipped it slowly over the white apron at Samantha's waist. A long, deliberate pour, the pale liquid spreading down the fabric without hurry. Someone nearby laughed, low and uncertain. Now you have something expensive on you. Evelyn set the empty flute back without looking away. You're welcome. Samantha looked down at the stain, then back up. There was no humiliation in her expression, no anger, no tears forming at the edges of anything. There was something worse. Something Evelyn couldn't read, which was the first sign that Evelyn had miscalculated. When I marry Minho, Evelyn said. Quieter, turning back toward the pool as if the conversation were already finished. I'll be making changes to the household staff. Anyone who doesn't understand their place will find a different one. Samantha picked up a linen napkin from the serving cart and pressed it once against the apron. Then she lowered it. I understand my place exactly, she said. I wonder if you understand yours. Evelyn paused, turned back. The practiced smile sharpened into something else, but Samantha had already turned toward the north entrance, where the modified driver was precisely where she'd predicted he would be. Near the east hedgerow, watching the crowd. She sent the second signal. Ji-Sok moved, and across the patio, at the glass canopy table where Kang Dae Sung had been sitting for the last 40 minutes, in the particular stillness he used when he was waiting, she caught the slight turn of his head. He had watched the whole thing. Good. The champagne dried in the sun by 2:15. Samantha changed nothing visible. She coordinated the second course service, repositioned 2 guards after noting that Evelyn's companion, the woman, the face from the 11-day-old intercept, had moved twice near the east hedgerow to make a phone call. She kept the apron on. She kept the same measured pace. The stain on the white cotton darkened slightly as the afternoon sun moved over it. She let it darken. Inside, she was running a timeline. 3 years of construction came down to a single window. The event closed at 4. Minho planned the formal announcement at 3:30. Right before the guests departed. That left 75 minutes. She needed 60. The signal she'd sent to Dae-sung wasn't a request for permission, it was a confirmation. She was ready to move. He had been watching the operation from the outside long enough to trust her judgment completely. What the champagne incident had done, what Evelyn didn't know she'd done, was provide the final behavioral evidence that 6 months of financial intercepts alone couldn't give her. Pattern was one thing, character was another. Evelyn had just demonstrated her character in front of 40 witnesses. The woman who had called 2 fingers at her across the pool wasn't impulsive. She was entitled. There was a significant difference. Impulsive people made mistakes out of emotion. Entitled people made worse ones. They assumed their mistakes would simply be absorbed by people below them, the way spilled champagne was absorbed by an apron. Evelyn Hart had never imagined she could be wrong about who was beneath her. At 2:30, Ji-suk came through the crowd with the particular unhurried directness that meant this was the moment. He was the one she had positioned specifically for this. A member of Dae-sung's inner security for 20 years. A man who had called her Miss Frost from her very first week in the house, before anyone else understood the significance of that address. Before, in fact, anyone else had ever thought to ask. Mrs. Frost, he said clearly, pitched precisely to carry to the 8 guests nearest to them. Mr. Kang is asking for you, Mrs. Frost. It moved through the patio the way a dropped glass moved through a silent room. The small sound that made everything stop. 3 guests turned. 2 more near the water registered it and adjusted their gaze. The string quartet, which had been midway through something unhurried and European, let it fade, and Evelyn, standing at the far side of the pool in the white dress, went very still. Samantha set the linen tray on the serving cart. She removed the champagne-stained apron, folded it once with both hands, and placed it on the nearest chair. Then she crossed the patio, not quickly, not ceremonially. She moved through the space the way she moved through every space she inhabited, with the particular steadiness of a person who had measured every exit and she didn't need one. Kang Dae-sung was beneath the glass canopy in the charcoal suit that had cost more than most people's monthly income, the thin platinum watch catching the afternoon light, the black dragon tattoo visible above his collar as he turned his head. He did not rise. He did not need to. Samantha took the seat at his right, not behind him, not one step back, at his side. 40 guests recalibrated simultaneously. It was visible. The slight straightening of spines, the lowered voices, the glances exchanged between people who had understood the hierarchy of this household, and were now revising that understanding from the ground up. Dae-sung allowed a nearby conversation about a development deal to close naturally, then turned to Samantha the way he had been turning to her for 3 years, the way you turn to a partner. The driver, he said quietly. Cheon Logistics Coordinator, intercept from 11 days ago. She kept her voice beneath the ambient noise of the patio. The woman by the east hedge made contact twice. She'll be gone before 4. A brief silence. Then, Evelyn? She confirmed herself. Samantha's eyes moved once across the pool to where Evelyn stood watching them both, with the sharp attention of someone trying to recalculate a room she no longer controlled. The financial irregularities weren't sufficient on their own. Behavioral evidence matters in front of witnesses. She behaved like someone who couldn't imagine consequences. Like someone who was told she wouldn't have any. Minho arrived on the patio at a half-run, confusion written plainly on his face. The cream shirt bright in the afternoon light. His expression carrying the particular disorientation of a man who has been looking at a picture for 3 years and has just noticed a piece he never registered. His eyes moved between his father and Samantha, with something that was neither accusation nor comprehension, just recalibration. The same process Samantha had watched 40 other people undergo in the last 2 minutes, but heavier. Because Minho had 38 months of believing, he understood who she was. "What's happening?" he asked. Daesung looked at Samantha. She looked at Minho. "Sit down." He sat. Across the pool, Evelyn began to move toward them. She was unhurried about it. Evelyn was never urgent, because urgency telegraphed stakes, and revealing stakes was the one thing a Fiancee in her position couldn't afford. She crossed the stone deck with the easy grace of a woman who still believed the day was hers, touching Minho's shoulder as she arrived, bending to press a brief kiss to his temple. "What's all this?" Her voice was soft and warm, aimed at Minho, but her eyes were on Samantha. Minho started to answer. Daesung cut through it. "Sit down, Evelyn." She sat. The quartet had stopped. No one had told them to stop. They had simply felt the change in the air. The way musicians feel a room shift before the audience does. And gone quiet. The afternoon sun continued. The pool continued. 40 people held their breath. Samantha reached into the concealed seam inside her dress. Evelyn Hart did not panic. That was what made her dangerous. She sat in the white chair, with her hands folded in her lap, the tennis bracelet catching the afternoon light. And she looked at Kang Dae-sung with the particular expression Samantha had catalogued in month 2 of her surveillance. Compliance performing itself as cooperation, the expression of a person buying seconds. "I don't understand," Evelyn said. Her voice was quiet, perfectly calibrated. The voice of someone who had been wronged and was choosing graciousness anyway. "Has something happened?" Dae-sung said nothing. The silence was a test. Evelyn recognized it as one. She turned to Minho. "Babe." Just the word, soft and intimate. The kind of address that worked in front of other people, because it reminded them that this was a private relationship they were watching from the outside. "What's going on?" Minho looked at his father, then at Samantha, then back at Evelyn. Samantha had anticipated this moment for months. She had planned for it, run it as a scenario, accounted for every variable she could calculate. She understood that the operational risk in this plan was never Evelyn's exposure. The exposure was coming regardless. The risk was the window between the beginning of exposure and the completion of it, because in that window, Evelyn would have access to every tool she'd spent 18 months sharpening. Minho's deep and sincere belief that people were fundamentally what they appeared to be. She hadn't expected it to cost her something personal. Minho said, "Samantha, how long have you been working with my father?" 3 years ago, the answer would have come clean and immediate, the operational response. But something about the way he said her name, not the staff or her, but her actual name, said with the same warmth he gave to every name he'd ever learned, made her recognize that she had committed her own version of Evelyn's error. She had underestimated what it would cost to be genuinely seen by someone who had never been trying to see her. 3 years, she said. Minho looked at the table. Evelyn moved immediately. That was the thing about her. She was fastest in the moment of maximum instability. When other people paused, Minho. She reached across and took his hand. Her voice dropped, as if the conversation had become private. Despite 40 witnesses, I need you to understand what this is. Your father controls every relationship you've ever had. You've said it yourself. He manages everything. A fractional pause, calibrated precisely. This woman was placed in your home. You didn't choose her presence. He did. And now he's sitting here telling you that the person who has been serving you for 3 years was his operative the entire time. And you're supposed to feel protected by that? She was good. Samantha gave her that without reservation, because Evelyn had just done the most efficient thing possible with the available material. She had taken the truth and used it as a weapon. Everything she'd said was accurate. Daesung had placed Samantha here. Minho hadn't chosen her presence. The protection was, but the cover was a lie. Every true thing arranged into a frame that made it mean something else entirely. Minho looked at Samantha. She watched his eyes do the thing she had feared. Not hostility, not accusation, something slower and more devastating. A question that didn't know how to ask itself yet. Is this true? Did my father put you here? And if he did, was any of it real? The 2 years of watching him recover from something he never fully named. The afternoons she'd sat nearby when he was in a bad way, saying nothing useful and meaning it. The time she'd told him without operational necessity that she thought he was going to be better at this than his father. And the way he'd looked at her, like she'd handed him something rare, none of it was fabricated. All of it had been real alongside the mission. She had told him that already. He had heard it. But Evelyn was still holding his hand, and the doubt in his eyes was the concrete thing Samantha was losing. 3 years of earned trust, slipsing on a single moment of manufactured uncertainty. She held his gaze and said nothing. Not because she had no answer, because the only counter to a truth used as a weapon was to let the rest of the truth arrive. Speaking now would be playing Evelyn's game on Evelyn's terms, and Evelyn's terms were the ones she'd been writing for 18 months. The silence stretched. Minho looked down then. He pulled his hand from Evelyn's. It was a small movement, barely perceptible to the guests, beyond the nearest tables. But Samantha saw Evelyn register it. A microscopic tightening around the eyes. There and gone in under a second. And she understood that Evelyn had also developed a vulnerability she hadn't planned for. Something in Minho had become genuine to her. Not genuine enough to stop the operation, but genuine enough to make losing him hurt. That was the difference between them. Minho said, "Let her finish." Evelyn blinked once. Let who finish? She kept the smoothness. Almost. Samantha. Not said as a kindness. Said as a decision. The warmth in his voice was still there. It never left him entirely, even now, but underneath it was something slower and colder that Samantha had watched develop over 3 years. The son who had always trusted his father's instincts, arriving at the moment when that trust would have to cost him something real. Evelyn's mouth closed. The string quartet had not moved. 40 guests sat at glass tables and looked at their hands, and did not look at each other. The screen, Samantha said to Jisuk. He was already moving. The footage was 43 minutes in total. Samantha had edited it to 12. The screen opened on a timestamp from 6 months ago. A private dining room near the financial district. The angle, high and slightly oblique. The footage security systems produce. Official feeling without announcing its source. At the table, Evelyn Hart in the blazer she'd worn twice since, and a man with a narrow face and a silver ring on his right hand, who had attended 3 public events linked to the Cheon family. Without appearing on any official guest list, she watched Minho watch the screen. He had gone very still, not the stillness of shock, the slower, heavier stillness of understanding that 2 pictures of the same thing were actually 2 pictures of entirely different things. The footage cut to audio. A phone recording, metadata timestamped 11 weeks ago. Evelyn's voice came through unmistakable and clear. The old man trusts the girl too much. Once the accounts transfer, Samantha Frost is the first thing I remove from that house. She sees too much. No one at the tables moved. Minho's jaw tightened once. Just once. The final document appeared on screen. An organizational chart. The Cheon family's known network, sourced from 3 intelligence intercepts over 14 months. Evelyn's name appeared in the 3rd tier. Under the heading Placed Assets, she had been inserted into Minho's social orbit through a fabricated series of mutual connections 18 months before the gallery opening, where he had believed, sincerely, that they had met by chance. Evelyn didn't look at the screen. She was looking at Minho. "It's not," she started. "I heard your voice," Minho said. Flat, quiet. The warmth was gone entirely. What remained was his father's son. Evelyn's breath shifted. Daesung rose from his chair. He did not raise his voice. He didn't need to. The silence around the pool was total, and his voice moved through it. The way his voice moved through everything. Without effort, with complete authority, "You will leave this property. Jisuk will escort you to the car." He did not look at her when he said it. He was looking at Minho. "Leave the ring on the table." "On the table," Daesung said. Evelyn looked at Minho one last time. Something passed across her face that was not entirely performance. A calculation that had run its course and come out wrong. Then she reached for the diamond ring, placed it on the glass table with a sound so small it should not have carried across the patio, and turned. She made it 4 steps, then she stopped. And then, finally, the mask came off. She turned back toward Samantha. The practiced warmth left her voice completely. "Whatever you showed them, whatever your name is on some document," she gestured at Daesung, "you're still the woman who carries their trays. That doesn't change. It doesn't change because of one afternoon." Samantha looked at her. "You attack the one person investigating your betrayal," she said. "You gave me everything I needed. You didn't see it. You work for. I work with." Samantha said it quietly. "That's the part you couldn't read. You know the difference between with and for. It's why you're standing on the wrong side of this pool." Jisuk stepped forward. Evelyn's companion, the woman from the east hedge, was already moving toward the north exit. The logistics coordinator from the modified delivery manifest had been gone for 40 minutes. Everything was clean and managed and cold. 40 guests watched in silence as Evelyn Hart was escorted from the Kang estate. No theater, no raised voices, no scene. Just the sound of heeled sandals on stone, growing quieter and then gone. Minho stood at the edge of the pool for a long time, looking at the ring on the table. Samantha stood nearby. Not close enough to be comfort, not far enough to be absence. Eventually he turned. "You've been here 3 years," he said. Not an accusation. A reckoning with a fact he was still assembling. "Yes. And I had no idea." "No." He looked at her. May, fully the way he looked at people when he actually meant it. "Were any of it real? The conversations. The times you sat with me when things were bad. Was that?" "It was real," she said. "The mission was real. Those things were also real. Both can be true at once." He nodded slowly, then quieter. "I didn't say anything when she poured that champagne on you. I was on the other side of the patio. I saw it. I didn't come over. I know. I thought you were. I know what you thought. Not hard. Not forgiving yet either, just precise. That's the thing worth sitting with. Not today. But later. He said nothing. He looked at the ring on the glass table, and then at the pool, and then at his father, who had returned to the canopy chair and was watching his son with an expression that had never been visible before on that particular face. Something close to hope. Samantha turned toward the main building as she passed the serving cart. The champagne-stained apron was still folded on the chair where she'd left it. She picked it up, looked at the pale gold stain spreading through the white cotton. The mark of someone who had been absolutely certain of who she was dealing with. She let the apron drop into the pool. It floated for a moment, spreading whiteness, darkening as the water claimed it. Then it sank, slow and quiet, all the way to the blue tile floor. In the private meeting room, Dae Sung was already at the table. Documents spread across the dark wood. The next phase of the organization, the operational transition, the restructuring of authority. He had been drafting for 6 months. He slid a pen toward her. "You were right about Evelyn," she sat. "I usually am." He watched her sign. "No more uniform." She set down the pen. "Keep one in the closet." He waited. "Arrogant people always talk too much around someone they think can't see them." He looked at her for a long moment. Then he turned back to the documents. Outside, the pool was still. The apron had settled. The afternoon sun moved over the surface of the water and lit it from above, and the white cotton was invisible now, just part of the quiet blue depth. Exactly where it belonged. If this story moved you, stop for a moment and reflect. Have you ever protected someone who didn't know they were being protected and stayed silent because the time wasn't right? Have you ever been treated as invisible by someone who needed you to stay that way? Tell us your experiences and feelings in the comments. We read them all, and if you believe in stories about dignity, silent power, and the cost of contempt, leave a like. Be sure to subscribe to the channel and click join to become a part of our community and help the channel.